Aerys I was the 13th king in the Targaryen dynasty, and probably the most underrated too. Not in the sense that he was way cooler than people give him credit for, even though I think he is, but because he's so forgettable. He's underrated because he doesn't get rated at all. This is the 14th video in my Targaryen Kings series, in which I explore and analyze the reigns of each king in the Targaryen dynasty. Aerys sat the throne for 12 years, from 209 to 221 AC. His family's dragons were long gone, the last one having died in 153 during the reign of Aegon the Dragonbane, Aerys' great-gruncle. However, Aerys' life was defined by his search for prophecies that likely concerned the prince that was promised and the return of House Targaryen's dragons. This video will spoil major plot points from the Dunk and Egg novellas. If you're trying to remain spoiler-free for the upcoming Hedge Knight adaptation, you'll probably want to leave and go watch my Daenerys video instead. Aerys was born sometime in the mid-170s. We're not given a specific year, but it had to have been after his older brother Baelor Breakspear was born in 170, but before his younger brothers Rhaegal and Mycah were born. So Aerys was in his 30s when he became king, just like his father Daeron II was. Although Daeron already had Aerys and his big brother Baelor by the time he ascended. Aerys was much less interested in the art of procreation, but he did have a wife, Queen Eleanor Penrose. You might be thinking, wow, a Penrose? From House Penrose of Parchments in the Stormlands? Good for Aerys, not doing incest like almost all the other Targaryens. But you'd be wrong. We know for a fact Eleanor Penrose was some level of cousin to Aerys. But according to Elio Garcia, a professional fan correspondent of George R.R. Martin, Eleanor was not descended from Elaena Targaryen, one of Aegon III's daughters who married Lord Ronald Penrose. Lord Ronald even became Master of Coin for Daeron II, Aerys' father, but I guess Eleanor being one of his daughters would be too easy. Perhaps a daughter of Daeron's sister Daenerys, who wed Meryn Martell, married a different male Penrose, and their daughter was Eleanor. Or, one of Rhaena Targaryen's 6 daughters with Garment Hightower may have married a Penrose and created Eleanor. Leave your Eleanor Penrose theories in the comments. Aerys became king because his brother Baelor and his nephews Valar and Materis all died. His reign began during the Great Spring Sickness, a nasty plague that took the lives of King Daeron and both of Baelor's sons. Across the realm, Lord Dagon Greyjoy began reaving all along the western coast. And across the narrow sea, Bittersteel planned his future rebellions with the sons of Daemon Blackfyre. The new king was simply not cut out for all that turmoil, so Aerys named his uncle Bloodraven Hand of the King, while he fucked off to read more books. Aerys' official portrait, drawn according to George Martin's explicit instructions, tells us all we need to know. He's skinny, spindly, and stooped, with stringy, unkempt hair and soiled, elaborate robes. He was so busy reading old books and scrolls that he forgot to change his clothes, and the rims of his eyes grew red from all his constant reading. Officially, he took the dragon crown of his father and grandfather, although Martin makes a point that it rests atop a pile of books. The crown symbolizes Aerys' reign, forgotten about, the finer details of ruling left to Bloodraven, while the king shut himself away with his prophecies. I'll remind you that this is where the Targaryen family stands by the start of Aerys' reign. We've finally reached a point in this series where a character from the main books and show is alive, besides Bloodraven. Maester Aemon was Aerys' 11-year-old nephew at the time, and his brother Egg was 9, off wandering Westeros while squiring for Sir Duncan the Tall. Bloodraven was named Hand of the King at the start of Aerys' reign. Recall that Brynden Rivers is one of Aegon the Unworthy's many bastards who was legitimized on his deathbed, along with Daemon Blackfyre, of course, Bittersteel, and Shiera Seastar. Shiera and Brynden were a couple of weirdos. Bloodraven employed a vast network of spies, used his own personal guard of Raven's Teeth to garrison the Red Keep, and he and Shiera were said to use sorcery to discover the realm's secrets. The new Grand Maester was as steeped in sorcery as Bloodraven was, according to Septon Sefton, who used to work in the Great Sept of Baelor in King's Landing. Bloodraven was Varys the Spider, Tywin Lannister, and Bran Stark all in one. Some believed that Aerys gave Bloodraven so much power because they shared an interest in arcane lore, ancient history, and the higher mysteries. This suspicion is both well-founded and is what I'm going to base my entire theory on for this video. Prince Mycor, Aerys' little brother, expected he'd be named Hand of the King, so when Aerys named Bloodraven, Mycor went off to sulk in Summerhall. A few years earlier, Mycor had accidentally murdered his own brother, Baelor Breakspear, and the whole realm knew him for a kinslayer. To be fair, Bloodraven was an even more notorious kinslayer, having killed Daemon Blackfyre, his half-brother, and Daemon's 2 sons on the Red Grass Field. So Mycor was certainly the lesser of the 2 evils, but Bloodraven got the job. I have an old, poorly made video where I theorized about Bloodraven's involvement in the Targaryen prophecy, the one introduced to us in House of the Dragon Season 1, and is confirmed to exist in book canon as well.
In some sense, he saw what was coming 300 years later and wanted to unify the 7 kingdoms to be better prepared for the threat that he eventually saw coming from the north, the threat that we're dealing with in A Song of Ice and Fire.
This prophecy clears up some of the mysteries of the later Targaryen kings, and helps explain why certain characters, like Aerys I, Bloodraven, Aegon V, Jaehaerys II, and even Rhaegar and Maester Aemon acted the way they did. Aemon mentions a prophecy in 2005, and implicates Rhaegar as well. Rhaegar mentioned it during Dany's House of the Undying trip in 1998. In 2011, Barristan reveals that Dany's grandfather Jaehaerys knew about the prophecy as well, and his father Aegon V became obsessed with dragon lore, and committed some type of prophecy-related blood magic ritual at Summerhall, I'm sure of it. We learn about Summerhall in 2000, and about Aegon's descent into dragon obsession in 2014. My point is that Aegon the Conqueror's prophecy about a Targaryen prince that was promised has been on George's mind for decades, and I know I can make it make sense. Stick with me here. From the death of the last Targaryen dragon in 153 until the rebirth of dragons in 299, there were at least 6 known dragon dreamers. Daenerys, obviously, but also Maester Aemon, and all of his brothers as well. My brothers dreamed of dragons too, and the dreams killed them. Every one. Also, Daemon Blackfyre's son, Daemon II, was a dragon dreamer as well. More on him in a bit. We also know that Aegon III, Viserys II, Baelor I, Aegon V, and Aerys II all tried and failed to hatch dragons. Was this simply because they wanted dragons, or because they were trying to fulfill prophecy? King Aerys I read about dragons returning in a prophecy. His nephew Daeron dreamed of it. As a boy, Rhaegar read a scroll that changed him, and convinced him to become a warrior. When Maester Aemon hears about Dany's dragons, he believes that proves she's the prince that was promised. I think this is all connected. The prophecy Rhaegar and Aemon discussed is the same one Aerys read some 50 years earlier, telling of a Targaryen dragonlord who must put an end to the threat from the north. This is also why I think George has known since he began his series that Daenerys and her dragon's true purpose is to fight the White Walkers. She is the culmination of this centuries-long prophecy. She is the Targaryen that all her ancestors foresaw, without even knowing it, bringing the power of dragons back into the world. The Second Blackfyre Rebellion occurred in 212 AC, the 3rd year of Aerys' reign. It wasn't so much of a war, rather a short-lived conspiracy stamped out by Bloodraven and his spies, which also might be Bloodraven. Look up the Maynard Plum theory. The main instigator was Lord Gorman Peake of Starpike, who is a reference to my second favorite fantasy series, Gormenghast, by author Mervyn Peake, featuring a villain called Steerpike. The main character is called Titus Groan. He has purple eyes like a Targaryen, and currently, Titus Peake is the Lord of Starpike, and there was another Titus Peake during the Dance of the Dragons. Seriously, read these books. Gormenghast is a beautiful expression of a young man's angst and curiosity in a setting where any deviation from the monotonous laws of the castle is heresy. Gorman Peake had 2 of his 3 castles taken away by King Daeron after the rebels lost the first Blackfyre Rebellion, so he used the wedding between Lord Butterwell and a daughter of House Frey to gather his conspirators. Years earlier, Aegon the Unworthy gifted Lord Butterwell's grandfather a dragon egg, and now this egg is being offered as the champion's prize for this wedding tourney at White Walls. Daemon II Blackfyre was a dragon dreamer. He tells Sir Duncan the Tall, "I dreamed it, this pale white castle, you, a dragon bursting from an egg. I dreamed it all, just as I once dreamed of my brothers lying dead. They were 12 and I was only 7, so they laughed at me and died. I am 22 now, and I trust my dreams." Daemon also dreamed of Dunk becoming a Kingsguard. He thought it meant he'd win his rebellion and name Dunk to his own Kingsguard, but Dunk ended up serving egg when he became King Aegon V. And the dragon that Daemon dreamed bursting from an egg was also probably Aegon himself. It was a metaphor. The little squire egg burst from his shell and became a true Targaryen dragon, helping to nip Daemon II's rebellion in the bud. Bloodraven descended upon White Walls with an army, but Daemon Blackfyre didn't have an army to match. Bittersteel refused to back him with the Golden Company, either because he felt Gorman Peak was too blinded by vengeance to formulate a sound plan, or because he mistrusted Daemon's dragon dreams. Or, even more likely, Bittersteel refused to back Daemon II because he was gay. Daemon was constantly flirting with Dunk, even though Dunk was too innocent to notice. "I would love to cross swords with you, sir. I have tried men of many lands and races, but never one your size. Was your father large as well? Be my dog, sir, the night's alive with promise. We can howl together and wake the very gods. I suppose that means I'll have to take the throne then. I would much rather be teaching you to fiddle." Yeah, not very subtle, but Dunk the Lunk is thick as a castle wall. The first Blackfyre rebellion had perished on the Redgrass Field in blood and glory. The second Blackfyre rebellion ended with a whimper. Daemon offered to duel Bloodraven, or the coward King Aerys, but instead, Bloodraven took him prisoner and kept him under house arrest in the Red Keep. This meant that Bittersteel had to wait until Daemon died, which took about 7 years, until he could rebel again in favor of Haegon Blackfyre. Think about the self-restraint Bloodraven had, keeping a Blackfyre alive for 7 years without murdering him? Kudos to the albino. Lots of killing happened in the third Blackfyre Rebellion, which was an actual war in 219 AC, the 10th year of Aerys' reign. Bittersteel crowned Haegon Blackfyre, the 4th son of Daemon I. King Aerys stayed out of it, while his brother Mykar's sons Aerion and Aegon, and of course Bloodraven, all took action. In the final battle, Bloodraven had a second duel with Bittersteel, which he presumably won, because Haegon Blackfyre surrendered and offered up the sword. But then he was killed anyway, slain treacherously by an unnamed character. My guess is that Aerion Brightflame did it, as we're told he took actions, whereas Mykar showed leadership and Aegon showed courage. Maybe actions is just a nicer way of saying Aerion killed a surrendered unarmed man. Bloodraven probably just would have done the same thing with Haegon that he did with Daemon II, imprison him indefinitely so that another Blackfyre couldn't be crowned. Aerion was not the brightest jar of wildfire. Bittersteel was taken to King's Landing, given a trial, and found guilty. Bloodraven and Aerion wanted to execute him, but King Aerys showed mercy and sent Bittersteel to the Night's Watch. His ship was intercepted by Blackfyre supporters, and Bittersteel went safely back to Tyrosh, where he crowned Haegon's son, Daemon III Blackfyre, and began plotting the 4th rebellion. So why did Aerys not kill Bittersteel? The simplest and most boring answer is that he didn't want to be called a kinslayer, since Aegor was technically Aerys' uncle, and Bloodraven and Mykar were already known kinslayers. The Targaryen dynasty didn't need a third. That would be bad PR. But I find it fascinating that one of the only times we see King Aerys actually make a kingly decision is to spare Bittersteel's life. Maybe Aerys knew that Bittersteel would be freed before reaching the Wall, and Aerys wanted him to continue the Blackfyre rebellions, since that was the easiest way to eradicate the Blackfyre line, and ensure the main Targaryen line is safe to produce the prince that was promised. Or maybe Aerys was just naive, and he really did think Bittersteel would join the Night's Watch. Aerys wanted a Targaryen on the Wall in case the others came, since I doubt the Conqueror's prophecy mentioned when the darkness shall arise. That would be too easy. Aerys might have been preparing for a White Walker invasion during his own reign, and having Bittersteel at the Wall, a strong Targaryen military commander, wasn't a bad idea. Maybe this also helps explain why, years later, Aegon V sent Bloodraven to the Wall, and allowed him to take Dark Sister with him. His reasoning might have been the same as Aerys's. The Targaryens needed one of their own on the Wall to oversee the threat of the others. But I don't know, just a theory.
Maybe. It's classified.
King Aerys refused to have children with Queen Eleanor, and some people believe the marriage was never even consummated. He'd sooner take a book to bed than any woman. So his heir was his younger brother Rhaegal, who was called mad and feeble-minded, and pranced naked around the Red Keep. Rhaegal died in 215 AC after choking on pie. He was married to Alis Arryn, and had 3 kids, the twins Aelor and Aelora, who married each other, and Daenora, who married her cousin Aerion Brightflame. Aelor became the heir after Rhaegal died, but just 2 years later, he died in a grotesque mishap caused by his own sister wife Aelora, who became mad with grief. Maybe Aelora was taking sorcery lessons from Bloodraven and Shiera Seastar, her great-aunt and uncle, and when she tried it alone, she killed Aelor by accident. Sorcery is a sword without a hilt. There is no safe way to grasp it. This also makes Aelora the second Targaryen alive at this time who's haunted by their own accidental kinslaying of their brother. Aerys was a feminist king, or he just hated his brother Mycor, so he made Aelora his new heir. Unfortunately, Aelora was attacked at a masked ball by 3 men called the Rat, the Hawk, and the Pig. She ended up committing suicide shortly afterward. Her attackers' identities are not known, but my favorite theory is that they were Duncan the Tall's childhood friends from Fleabottom, Ferret, Rafe, and Pudding. The 4 of them would terrorize girls in Fleabottom and force them to kiss a severed head before they let them go. So maybe Dunk and Egg were at this masquerade, and Dunk invited his 3 friends who he hadn't seen in years. Maybe they were jealous of Dunk's high station in the royal family, so they took their anger out on Princess Aelora. They do have a track record of attacking little girls. Hopefully we'll find out how Aelora killed Aelor, and the circumstances of her own death, in a future Dunk and Egg story, or maybe Fire and Blood Volume 2. So the brooding prince of Summerhall, Mycor, became Aerys' 4th and final heir. King Aerys died in 221 AC of natural causes. He would have been in his 50s, which is too young to die of old age, so we can assume that some illness got him, or maybe a stroke, which is how Aegon the Conqueror died. Aerys spent his reign scouring old scrolls and books, leaving most kingly duties to Bloodraven, who shared Aerys' arcane interests. During the past 2 reigns, 7 Targaryen heirs died. Some, like Daeron II, Valar, and Materys, inconspicuously died of a plague. Others died more conspicuously. Did Bloodraven have a hand in Aelor's mishap? Was Aelora's suicide more of a homicide? Did Bloodraven put something in Rhaegal's pie, causing him to choke? Even more Targaryen heirs would die under King Mycor's reign, for which Bloodraven was still Hand of the King. I'll save my accusations for that video, but I do find it a little strange how so many potential Targaryen rulers died during Bloodraven's tenure in King's Landing, so that Egg could end up becoming an unlikely king, and his line produced Daenerys and Jon. Anyways, thank you for attending another Bloodraven video, this time disguised as an Aerys I video. Let me know in the comments if you think King Aerys knew about the Targaryen prophecy, and if you have any theories about Aelor and Aelora, I'd love to hear those as well. Thanks for watching.